for this video, I will obviously be reviewing the Italian for you guys because I finally finished it today. And I decided to film the same day I finished it just so everything could be relatively fresh in my mind. So, spoiler alert ahead of time, just because I can't guarantee that I won't say anything that will ruin the ending for you guys. So one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to book reviews is when people talk more about what happens in the book, about the plot, like this happens to this and this happens and da-da-da, instead of actually reviewing the book. So because of that, I won't talk too much about what the book is about, or at least not about the plot and what happens and things like that. I will express how I felt about what happened, but not just tell you what happens, if that makes sense. So the Italian is a relatively well-known piece of Gothic literature by a female author, and Radcliffe actually considered it to be one of her best works, if not her best. I will say that it wasn't as good as I thought it would be. I don't love it, but I don't hate it either, so that's good. It was good. When I read up on it, it kind of makes sense why I felt this throughout while reading it. So Radcliffe actually both admired and was shocked by Lewis's The Monk. So if you haven't read The Monk, then you absolutely have to read it, okay? Radcliffe read that book, and she, like I said, she both liked it and disliked it. And you can see that reflected in this book, in the Italian. She was shocked and somewhat appalled by how do I describe it? The intensity, the borderline vulgarity. It's that extra, basically, indulgence of passions that was present in The Monk, if that makes sense. Like, Lewis went all in terms of emotions and describing things that happened, letting things happen, things like that. If you haven't read it, then this won't really make much sense, but if you have, then you'll understand what I'm talking about. By the time Radcliffe wrote the Italian, she had read The Monk, and you can see that you can see parallels and similarities between the two books. However, you can tell where Radcliffe pulls back, where it's almost like she's afraid to indulge where Lewis did, if that makes sense. And it goes back to her being just shocked by the things that he did in his book. And I felt that throughout the entire thing. I was like, oh, this would be so much more great or amazing if she had only done this, or if she had went further with this. Also, okay, the ending. It was quite predictable until the ending, kind of. Which is one thing that I really liked about The Monk. I'm gonna compare like every Gothic novel I read now to The Monk. Anyways, I liked the fact that The Monk actually had a sad or tragic ending. It wasn't a happy ending where everything worked out and everything was cool and the heroine and the hero get together and da-da-da-da. You know, that was not the case here. To a degree. Because in the end of The Monk, spoiler alert, in the end of The Monk, the heroine is actually deflowered. She's actually, in terms of the heroine, the definition of the heroine in Gothic literature, she is ruined, and the antagonist actually succeeds. That's not really a thing in Gothic literature, for the most part. There are exceptions, of course. And that made me think, I don't know if you guys have ever read The Rising of the Gothic novel by Maggie Kilgore, but if you have not, and especially if you consider yourself to be knowledgeable of the genre of Gothic literature, then you definitely need to read it. So the comparison of the monk and the Italian made me think of something that Kilgore said in her book about how, I think it was her book, oh my gosh, I've read so much about Gothic literature and I've written so many like papers on it that it all just kind of mushes together. Anyways, that there's something about the Gothic that's wild, perhaps because it explores the wild, that when it reaches the end, it scrambles to come back together and make sense and give a happy ending, if that makes sense. And you see that in Radcliffe's piece, because even though the Gothic explores the wild and it takes advantage of it and it uses it, and yes, explores it, it's funny, it's interesting, because it makes me think of Heart of Darkness as well. My mind is going in so many directions. Okay, wait, I feel like I am rambling and I am sorry. Okay, this is about the Italian. It does have a happy ending, unfortunately. And yeah, which I'm sure for some people is great. I don't necessarily like happy endings. I actually started reading it at the beginning of this year. And I got to a part where after Vivaldi rescues Elena, helps her escape from the convent, she tells him that she must renounce him. I read that and I put it away. I felt way too much about that. I'm like, this girl. Because, I mean, to a degree, while you're reading it, you have to remember the time period and how important family and social status and all of that were, especially in terms of marriage. So I give it that. But at the same time, she's so obstinate throughout the entire thing that it's frustrating. I mean, since it has a happy ending and everything works out in the end, then I guess it's excusable. But I mean, if I were in her situation, heck yeah, I would have married him right after that as soon as possible. Whatever. I guess it just comes with the happy ending. I guess that just makes the happy ending worth all of the trouble. Now, I understand the significance of nature and scenery and whatnot in the Gothic. It's very significant. However, and I do adore Radcliffe's ability to describe and create such scenery, especially if she's in the cases where she's never even been to those places. However, it was very extensive in this piece, I feel like. There were entire pages and paragraphs that I skipped just because I did not want to have to read through all of these descriptions of the mountains and the rivers and this room. Like, I want to get to the good stuff. I mean, I would read some of it, but if I could sense that she was just going on and on and on, and I would eventually lose interest, if I'm being honest. I can only handle so much. That might just be me. Not everyone is like that, but I can only take so much description before I just skip it before I just stop caring. I understand. Don't hear what I'm not saying in this whole video, but especially here. So when in the second volume, spoiler alerts here. In the second volume, Elena and Chidoni, you find out that Elena is Chidoni's daughter. And I was like, oh, okay, I saw that coming, like, duh. Given patterns in Gothic literature, I suspected that Chidoni would either fall in love with Elena or he would end up being related to her somehow, like her father. In this case, when I read that, I was like, okay, that was pretty predictable. What is so special about this book, you know? But then the ending, and I love how in-depth into the Inquisition that Radcliffe went. That was great. That was great. I thoroughly enjoyed that. One of the things she said, it's in chapter 4 of the 3rd volume. By this time, Vivaldi has been imprisoned by the Inquisition and has been interrogated a couple times, I think. Elena here is in La Pieta, and it's just talking about the abbess, and it goes, of course, into religion, and of the abbess it says, her religion was neither gloomy nor bigoted. It was the sentiment of a grateful heart, offering itself up to a deity who delights in the happiness of his creatures. And she conformed to the customs of the Roman Church without supposing a faith in all of them to be necessary to salvation. Now, here's the important part, the part that I highlighted. This opinion, however, she was obliged to conceal lest her very virtue should draw upon her the punishment of a crime from some fierce ecclesiastics who contradicted in their practice the very essential principles which the Christianity they professed would have taught them. Very important. So yes, it brings up a lot of social issues, of course, which social and religious and whatnot, which can be like a whole separate video. But yes. So all of the mystery is very quickly untangled. It's done so in a way that doesn't, at least to me, it doesn't seem messy. It doesn't seem quickly patched up or anything. So that's a plus. I think that might be it. I don't have too much, aside from that, I don't think I have too much to say about the book. Like I said, it was, I'm not in love with it. The only part that really excited me, like, I love a book while I'm reading it, every time I read it, I can't put it down. There are moments, I'm sure, where I might get bored, but those moments have to be very few and far between in order for me to, in order for them to be overlooked, I guess, or outweighed by everything else about the book. So in this case, most of the time, I could totally put down the book with no problem. The only exception was when, during the third to last chapter or something like that, where Vivaldi and Chidoni and that mysterious monk whose name I believe is Nikolai, where all of that happens and basically all of the mystery is finally solved and revealed. Even with Elena, I didn't really care much about her outside of figuring out who exactly were her parents and such. But yeah. And when Elena is kidnapped, and she meets Shidoni for the first time, and all of that happens. Those were really the only two parts that I was really, really interested in, and that I didn't want to put the book down. So yeah, sorry not sorry, that's just my opinion, that's just how I feel about it. Yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I do not recommend this book at all, as it is an atrocity, don't ever read it. 10 being you absolutely have to read this. I would put this at a I feel like 5 is like a cop-out answer always. I'm gonna say a 6. Yeah, I'll say a 6, maybe 6.5. Yeah. Up next is Melmoth the Wanderer. I've heard many things about this. I've heard also another, which I'm excited to read, also because it inspired Poe and Wilde and Baudelaire, so high expectations already for this book. If you have anything that you would like for me to read and review, just to hear my thoughts about it, then do leave that down below for me, and I will get to it as soon as I can. But that's it for this video. I hope you guys liked it. Yeah, I guess I will see you when I see you. Bye.